Welcome to Mark D Maker. My name's Mark Taylor. Yeah, we got some weather going on outside. Does look beautiful though, doesn't it? Today we're going to be working on the hummingbird, a perched hummingbird. And I've done a little sanding on it and a little carving on it, a little more since the last one. You can see the book that I'm using off to the left for the pattern. Be sure if you buy this book, it's a second edition. Now, this one I left the beak on it, and I'm leaving it a little thick and stocky until I get it all the way finished, and then I'll thin out that beak at the very last step in carving. Now, I did this with a straight knife so you can see how rough it is. I used the gouge on the one that I have in my hand there. But regardless which one you use, you still need to sand it, and it's a steady, smooth ramp from the back to the tail. So you can see right there, it's a smooth transition. Since the last video, I also cut the excess wood out from underneath the wings. And you need to get to this stage whether you're going to do realistic like this one, whether you paint it, or you decide to go with a clear finish or a stain. You need to get to the point to where it looks like a hummingbird. Here's a stylized one that just has a clear coat on it. You can see this is all one piece of wood. The beak is included. One piece. And here's another stylized one. And the concept that I was going for is remove as much wood as I could from it, but let it remain looking like a hummingbird, a recognizable hummingbird. Now, when I'm doing stylized, I do a lot of conceptual drawings, until I see a design that I want. Now here I'm working on getting the beak more narrowed down. The safest bet is with sandpaper. There's not a whole lot of wood there, so you can get pretty quick results using 100 grit or 120 grit. If you're going to use a knife in this area, little tiny slivers, be very careful. When I did the first couple of hummingbirds that I did, I just carved the beak right off, and it is the most frustrating thing, especially if you wanted to do a clear coat or a stain or a light wash. So just take your time, and sandpaper's your friend when you're working on a delicate part like this. Just be patient. Okay, so we're going to work on inserting this. It's actually a brazing rod. So it's a steel rod that has a copper covering on it. And it's about the right diameter for the beak. Here I'm flattening out the beak to make it easier to drill. And I'm carefully looking with the drill bit to make sure if I don't have a flat surface for that whole drill bit to go in through, it'll dig out part of the either upper or lower part of the head. So I'm just making sure I have enough, a little tiny tapered drill bit would be perfect for this to start it. But here we got drill bit that we're just going to, I'm lining it up with the center line. and I can see it's not enough flat surface there for it, so I'll just get it a little flatter. It's pretty important to have enough flat surface for the drill bit to go in, and it doesn't have to go all that far, but you want the wire rod to go in there enough to hold it. I put it in a little bit further. Got plenty of room to go in without coming out the back of the head. Don't push too hard though, because the basswood's pretty soft and it'll drill really quickly. Here's one that has the wings up, and since I'm doing this process, I have the drill bit, I have the wire rod. I'll go ahead and do this one, and this is a very typical thing that happens. I got the drill hole, it drilled nicely, but it did dig out a little top of the nose area, and that's okay, because I'm going to use epoxy putty to insert this rod into and make that transition. The important thing is down the center. You need that beak to be right in the center. So if it does that, no worries. I use Magic Sculpt 2-part epoxy, and this stuff is wonderful. It gets hard as a rock. It's easy to use, water soluble, so you can manipulate it with a little water. Love it. All right, so this is what it looks like when it's all mixed together. It's uniform in color. It's very soft, very malleable. Now what I've done is I've taken this and on the flying one, I'm using a bamboo skewer, and I've applied that, and just a little bit of water smoothed it out. You can see the water has gotten onto the wood a little bit and changed the color of the wood around the beak. That's okay. It'll dry nicely. And on the perched one, I used welding filler rod. This is not a brazing rod, it's a filler rod for oxyacetylene welding. So I used that rod, and I have it laying around. I used it for doing mobiles and things like that, kinetic mobiles. And just a little bit of water around it, and that helps it to smooth out. We'll let that dry, give it a light sanding, and that part will be done. Okay, so you see how I have that sandpaper bent? That works really well for getting those sweeping curves. So important. This part is critical to getting those nice flowing lines, smooth, graduated lines. Works wonderful. Okay, so you can see the back here, how it graduates. The back goes smooth all the way to the tail. To get that correct, that's important. Here we got feather groups and the tail, the primaries, and here the primaries are already roughly marked in. Now look at the tail here. You can see how the tail is configured. And on this one, the tail, I already have the tail feathers marked in. I have it swooped a little bit as if the tail is coming down and catching air. Pencil lines on the feather groups coming down the chest, belly, and then to the tail. and this is one way, if you don't have calipers with you, you could do it like this. Now it's not as accurate as calipers. And if you had calipers, you would measure from the tip of the beak to wherever, like the eye or the cheeks here. But this is one way you can kind of do it. You have to kind of look through the pattern. Don't hold the pattern tight to the body. You kind of have to look through it and put these lines in like so, and then adjust. By extending the lead out on the pencil and running it down the side of the beak, pretty much falls right in the center. Here I'm pulling in the cheeks. Once again, holding the lead on the side, trying to get the center of the beak. I'm going to turn this pattern around the other way. Now what I'll do is align the wing. I'm using the wing as a reference. It fits in really tight, really nice right here. And I'm able to put the cheek in. And here is the bottom. I'm referencing right out of the book. The bottom of how that line, the cheek line, comes across. Now, if you buy a pattern outright, you probably won't get an underneath marking like this. You'll have to research it on your own. And this is the beauty of having a book that will go into a lot of detail to show you these particular details. Now, when you're doing the eyes, it's very important to view it from the top, from the sides, from the front, and from underneath. You want to make sure that these eyes are even and look proper on both sides. Now, this is a different one. You can see the eyes aren't on this one. And I'm drawing in the feathers. The feathers that are on the underside of the neck. Now here I've taken the crown of the head down lower than the cheeks because that's what the pattern calls for. And I've drawn in the feathers. You can see the cheeks here. and I've put the eyes in. I went ahead and took a Dremel. It's a cone bit that had a carbon cutter cone bit, and drilled out the eyes. And it doesn't look like it matches up from the camera point of view, but from where I'm looking at, they're straight across and they match up perfectly. Alright, so next step, we're off to the Dremel, and we will carve in all these feathers across the head and the cheek. And here you can see that that is done. I simply started at the back and moved forward. It just seems to be easier that way. And now with the burner, I am going in at the base of each feather that was carved in and pulling out. And what that does is compress and pushes down on the outer perimeter of the feather, and as you come out of the feather, you lighten the pressure. That does several things. It makes the feather look undercut from the previous one and arches up because you have less pressure and less heat. The heat dissipates. As soon as you touch, it burns, and as you pull, the heat dissipates. If you pause and go back in, it's hot again. So you kind of learn this rhythm. Push in, pull, and that heat where you first initially touch sinks into the wood and then dissipates as you pull out. Okay, so you can see within these feather groups there are other feathers, smaller feathers within the groups. So you always want to establish the feather group first and then smaller feathers within. Now, I actually filmed this by accident in time lapse, which is super fast. But what I'm doing here is just going in, first relieving the areas of the feathers and then stoning the feathers in with a very, very fine ceramic stone. Ooh, okay, I'm glad that's done. That was too fast for me. So here I'm going in, and this is actually 2 times the speed. And I'm burning in the primary feathers here. What you want to do is just take your time. You do a center shaft, and then pull out, and then a slight curve to each one of these little barbs that come out. That slight curve adds a lot of realism. And every once in a while you'll see me stop, turn the burner sideways, and do a little split. So I want to give a special thanks to everybody that is stuck with me and still views the videos. I was kind of slacking a little bit these last couple of weeks. It's a rough couple of weeks, you know. Mama said there'd be days like this, but good lands, I had a couple of weeks like this. But I have a new job now in an environment that the people are friendly and nice and professional. So I'll hopefully get back on track here and get these videos out on a regular basis. And doesn't this music sound like Charlie Brown type of music? Anyways, let's get back to the bird. So I keep the burner at a low temperature. This is a tiny little creature. The feather barbs are very close together. If you burn at a high heat, it won't look right. You have to keep the heat low. Matter of fact, in the 30 plus years that I've been carving, I've never seen the tip of this burner red. I always keep it low when doing feathers. So I'm not sure if running at 2 times the speed does this any justice, but it takes a long time to do this, so I sped it up. And the important thing is when I go in burning a feather, I'm going in where the other feather is kind of undercut just slightly. And I'll place that burner in, and that's the darkest mark, and then I pull it forward quickly, pull it out, creating the barb, each barb off of the main shaft of the feather. So the burn line gets lighter and lighter as it goes out towards the end of the feather. Looks more realistic like that. And it gives the feather depth. It looks like it is undercut. Just looks better like that, that's all. So I had promised that I would finish up this bird in this video, but I think the video would just end up being way too long. So I am just going to finish burning this, and I'm going to do another video on putting the eyes in and painting it. Now, painting videos don't usually do as good as carving videos, but then everybody says they have a problem with painting. So do yourself a favor and watch the painting videos too. They're important. We're going to be using some iridescent powder to give that iridescent look that hummingbirds have. And here's an interesting fact about those iridescent feathers. It's completely mechanical that those feathers are iridescent. If you were to take those feathers and crush them, they would be gray. But they will shine and sparkle red or green or whatever color because the mechanical composition of the feather. They're really gray. Pretty interesting. Well, I hope this video was helpful. Please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.